A lot of us think part of the reason that we're stuck is because we're eating too many carbs. But what if you're stuck because you're not eating enough carbohydrates? Cutting our carbs, it's just over stressing a body that already can't handle it. And then you panic because you start gaining weight because that cup's overflowing, and you cut carbs more and you cut calories more, which actually make things worse. So carbs, when eaten correctly, actually help open that fat burning pathway. So you're like, okay, how much should I be eating then? How do I add them in? Because that's scary. We've all been very, very afraid of the potato. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast, where we help you understand this new body of yours. Maybe you've started to experience some hormonal symptoms, maybe you're post-menopause, but we know now that your body is inherently different and those old fat loss strategies just really aren't cutting it anymore. So it is time to learn how to work with this new body instead of against it, so you can open up those fat burning pathways, get your energy back, and feel confident again. And so today we are talking about one of my favorite topics, which is carbohydrates, carbs, because a lot of us think part of the reason that we're stuck is because we're eating too many carbs or we're eating too many calories. But what if you're stuck because you're not eating enough carbohydrates? What? I know it's totally crazy. And we do have a carb guide that you guys can download in the show notes for you that goes over some of our favorite carbohydrates, how they help you with fat loss. But let's talk about why carbohydrates are actually super important for fat loss, particularly as we go through perimenopause and menopause, post-menopause. This is something that we actually work with all of our clients, is typically bringing carbs up because we want carbs, right? Carbs are delicious. They are so good, but they also serve us so many important purposes for our health, our well-being, and also our physique. And so here are some signs that, you might not be eating enough carbohydrates. So maybe you have a few of these and now you're like, oh man, maybe I'm not getting enough carbs. That sounds kind of scary. So we're going to dive into it. So here are some of the most common signs. Afternoon energy crashes. By 2 or 3 p.m., you feel like you could just fall asleep at your desk. Poor sleep. You are tossing and turning, waking up between 2 and 3 a.m. You're wide awake, right? Intense sugar or salt cravings. Your body is screaming for some quick energy. If you're struggling with constipation, bloating, sluggish digestion, this can be a sign of we're lacking rich fiber carbs that are going to help support our digestion. If you're feeling puffy or inflamed, even though you're eating low carb, this is a stress response that can happen from a low carb diet. Or your workouts feel flat, right? There's no pump after your workouts. You should look a little bit more muscular. Maybe you're not having endurance in your workouts. You're struggling with strength gains. If your thyroid numbers are not great, this can also be a sign that your carbohydrates are too low. And so carbs are like logs on a fire. And without them, our body is stuck feeding on these tiny little twigs. It's never enough to get a really good fire burning. And that fire burning represents your metabolism, how good your body is at taking food and turning it into fuel instead of fat, how good your body is at burning calories. A tiny flame means our body is not good at burning calories. We want a nice big flame that's consistent and it's burning all of the time. And so when we're looking at carbohydrates, they've been demonized for a very long time. There is, the Atkins, there is the keto, there is the classic diet culture where low carb was marketed as this magic bullet. You just stop eating carbs and then you'll just whittle away, right? And yes, low carb may appear to work in that short term, right? And this is because of water loss. 1 gram of carbohydrates holds on to about 3 to 4 grams of water for digestion. Not fat, water. So if you go from eating, 200 grams of carbs a day to, let's say, even 100 grams of carbs a day, 100 times 4, that's going to be 400 grams of water. That has significant weight to it, right? And so you're losing water, not fat. What do you want to lose? Fat, not water, right? We know if we're not having enough water in our body and we're dehydrated, we're going to see an increase in inflammation, which actually blocks our fat burning pathway, pushes us into a storage state, and tells our body we have enough, let's store. Even though you're eating less and moving more and cutting your carbs and fasting, right? And so over time, what happens is this backfires, especially for women in midlife, because it stresses out your body more and your hormones already are under pressure. And so I always like to give the analogy of a bucket for your stress. If you've listened to my podcast for any amount of time, you know what I'm talking about. You have a bucket of how much stress your body can tolerate. And so when you're younger and you have a good hormone profile, that bucket's nice and big. When estrogen and progesterone start to go down, that bucket turns into like a cup. Okay. And so if that cup of water gets overflowing with stress, now we see a decrease in hormones, blood sugar gets worse, thyroid slows down, metabolism slows down, our body is worse at taking food and turning it into fuel, our body gets worse at burning calories, our liver function slows down, we see more inflammation, our bloating gets worse, digestion gets worse, our energy gets worse, it's harder to put on muscle mass, most of the time we're losing it and we're gaining fat. All of that happens when that cup overflows. And cutting carbs just turns on the nozzle to put more water into that cup. Cutting calories does this. Doing a ton of exercise does this. Not getting enough sleep, being go, skipping meals, not having enough protein in your diet, having more processed foods, lots of, protein bars and protein powders, things like that. Our body does better with whole foods. And so all those things, the cutting calories, cutting carbs, fasting, skipping meals, not getting enough sleep, go, the workouts, those just spray that poor cup with so much water. And so it's overflowing, and hence why you're struggling with weight loss and you feel so crappy because of everything I mentioned beforehand. And so what we need to do is turn down the nozzle and slowly pull water out of that cup and make that cup bigger. And carbohydrates actually help with that. It turns down the nozzle. It helps bring water out of the cup and helps our body expand that cup, which is amazing. That's what we want. And so when we're cutting our carbs, it's kind of like, it's just overstressing a body that already can't handle it. Like before we could handle a 9 out of 10 on the stress scale, now it's only a 5 out of 10. And then you panic because you start gaining weight because that cup's overflowing, and you cut carbs more and you cut calories more, which actually make things worse. And so what is happening in menopause specifically? Well, one, progesterone is dropping. So we have more restless sleep, right? We know this happens when progesterone goes down because progesterone's that nice calming hormone that our family loves when we have, because we are just a more chill, nicer version of ourselves. Let's be honest. But what comes with that is now we are more sensitive to stress as well. If we're not sleeping well, that cortisol is going to be higher, inflammation is going to be higher, blood sugar is going to be worse, despite the fact that you're cutting carbs. It'll actually probably make it worse. Declining estrogen. We know that when estrogen goes down, we also see a decrease in that stress tolerance, but we also lose muscle mass, which means that our muscles become less efficient at storing carbs. The more muscle you have, it's like you have more parking spots for carbohydrates to be stored in muscle cells instead of fat cells. So you want to maintain as much muscle as you have. It makes you more insulin sensitive, which means you're not struggling with blood sugar, which is good, because if we're insulin resistant, our body gets pushed into that storage pathway where our body is told we have enough, let's store, even though you're eating less and moving more and doing all the right things and cutting your carbs and fasting. And so that's going to mean that, if we're struggling with insulin sensitivity as well, not just because we lost muscle mass, but also declining estrogen makes us more insulin resistant. So our body doesn't handle sugar spikes as well. And so then a lot of us are like, hold on. If estrogen drops and makes us more insulin resistant, and therefore we can't handle carbs as well, aren't carbs therefore the last thing that I should be eating? The truth is, it's not about cutting carbs completely, because if we cut carbs completely, we'll make ourselves even more insulin resistant by making us more stressed out, affecting our sleep, losing muscle mass, right? And so it's understanding how to eat them and when to eat them. So when you slash carbs, your body is going to perceive that as famine. Carbohydrates are our body's preferred fuel source. And so what happens is that cortisol is going to go up, which actually makes insulin resistance even worse, because when cortisol goes up, your body goes, oh, we're under stress. We don't have enough energy to meet this demand. And that demand might just be that you're sitting at work going, I hate Bob. I hate Bob. Why does he have to work here? He is making my life so frustrating. Why can't Bob just shut up in meetings, right? Or maybe you're doom scrolling. Maybe you're watching social media and scrolling through Instagram, right? That's constantly increasing cortisol because of the blue light coming from your phone. Maybe it's because you didn't eat. Maybe because you are fasting. Maybe because you are not eating enough food. Maybe because you have emotional stress and you're dealing with sick parents and your kids are driving you crazy and your spouse and your go, go, go and deadlines got pushed up at work, right? Your body, even though you don't perceive it as stress, just because you don't acknowledge it doesn't mean your body isn't stressed. We see this all the time. Women come in, they're like, I'm fine. We do their Dutch test, we do their cortisol test, and boom, wow, crazy high levels of stress in your body. So just so you don't acknowledge it doesn't mean you're not experiencing it, because your symptoms say otherwise, as does your testing. And so we know that by increasing carbohydrates, it will actually help bring cortisol down, which brings blood sugar down, because we can't control our blood sugar from stress. We have clients who have CGM trackers and that test their blood sugar continuously, right? They get more spikes from stressful situations and poor sleep than they do their food. And so we can help, control your blood sugar control with the types of foods you're eating, the order of food that you're eating, the types of carbohydrates that you're eating. Because what happens is your body goes, oh, I need more energy to meet this demand, right? And so if you don't have food in your system, your body goes, okay, we got to get it from somewhere else. So cortisol goes up and then tells your liver to dump sugar into your bloodstream. Even if you're not having carbs, even if you are fasting, even if you are not eating, your body is going to dump carbohydrates into your bloodstream. So then your blood sugar goes up. Insulin comes up to help shuttle those sugars into ideally muscle cells and areas that we need it. But if we are insulin resistant, it is more likely that it will get shuttled into fat. And so what we want to do is make sure that we are timing things appropriately, eating carbohydrates in the right way that prevent cortisol from coming up, because food will help bring that down. And so when we see this tiny rise in our blood sugar, it maintains stable and then slowly comes down. Whereas if we aren't controlling it by the types of foods that we're eating and the types of carbs that we're eating and the right timing, we're seeing this massive blood sugar spike, and then you drop and then you have this crazy craving, and then it just keeps happening over and over and over again. And we see this a lot in women who fast, who only have coffee for breakfast. Your cortisol is already higher. So even if you're not eating, your body's gonna dump sugar into your bloodstream. And for a lot of women, they can't tolerate this. Your body's already under so much stress, that bucket is already overflowing, and fasting ends up causing them to gain weight. Cutting calories causes them to gain weight. They're cutting their carbs and they gain weight, or they're stuck despite doing all those things. That's because we're not addressing the bucket and controlling cortisol and blood sugar through nutrition. Instead, we're trying to not do stuff, aka not eat, not fast, we're fasting, not having our carbohydrates. When we don't control our bodies as well, we can control it so much more with the kind of food that we're eating. And so the right carbs, eaten with protein and fiber, help flatten that blood sugar response instead. So we're not on this crazy roller coaster all the time. Because when we're on that roller coaster, you become insulin resistant, which pushes you into that fat storing state, telling you we have enough, let's store. Even though you're eating less and moving more and cutting your carbohydrates, right? And so when we are looking at the role of carbs and fat loss, they play a very important role that is very overlooked, that people do not think about. So number one is supporting your thyroid. Your thyroid tells your body how good it is at burning calories. It takes food and turns it into fuel, okay? T3 conversion. So in order, T3 is a usable form of thyroid. We need to convert T4 into T3 so that our brain then gets the signal of, oh, we can burn calories. T3 conversion depends on carbohydrates. So if we are struggling with thyroid, we need adequate carbohydrates in our diet. Number two, like I mentioned, is lowering cortisol. Carbohydrates signal safety, reduce the stress hormones, so therefore we're not seeing a massive spike in blood sugars from that stress response. So then we're not stuck in that storage pathway. Fueling muscle. Muscle is your metabolic engine. The more muscle you have, the more calories you do in everything that you do. If I'm sitting here, burning more calories. Working out, burning more calories. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn in everything that you do. And so carbs are kind of the gasoline to fuel the car. So we want to make sure that we're supporting that. It helps with sleep and mood. Carbohydrates help make serotonin, which is your happy hormone. Serotonin then also converts into melatonin, which helps improve sleep and helps reduce, those nighttime wake ups. And so carbohydrates help with that substantially. And this is where a lot of people who eat low carb typically struggle with sleep. So we need to make sure that we are, getting adequate carbs throughout our day. Helps balancing blood sugar, like I mentioned. If you're having a donut on its own, obviously going to spike sugars, right? But if you are paying attention to, okay, if I'm having a donut right after my meal, amazing. Because that meal is going to slow down digestion. When it slows down digestion, you're not going to have as big of a blood sugar spike. The quicker something digests, the higher the spike, more quickly it comes up, which will trigger an insulin response, right? And so if we're having carbohydrates in the back half of our meal, so eating some protein and veggie first before dipping into carbs, you're going to see a much stable blood sugar response. So you can actually have your cake and eat it too, as long as you're eating it in the right order. And so that's not me saying you have cake at every single meal. We don't want that, but you can have those treats without it affecting your blood sugar as much if you are doing it appropriately. You never want to have carbs on its own. And when we're looking at our carbohydrates, we want to choose carbs that are higher in fiber wherever we can. Whole grains. We're looking at, rice. We're looking at quinoa. We're looking at potatoes are actually fantastic. They are packed full of serotonin, which are your happy hormones. So potatoes literally make you happy. Potatoes are so good for you. We have fruits, all of our berries, right? Those are very high in fiber, filled with antioxidants. Those lower inflammation, which will also lower cortisol, open those fat burning pathways, making fat loss possible. Gut health. Carbohydrates are how we get fiber, and those will lower inflammation. It's also the only way we can get prebiotics. Prebiotics are what feed our gut microbiome, and they only come from carbs. This is why we see a lot of people who've done keto for too long end up with gut health issues. People are like, oh, I love keto. It works so good. It gets abused a lot. And we're going to do a podcast on that in the future here right away about how to do it appropriately if you're going to do it. And you need to cycle. You're supposed to do these things with a very specific start date and end date for a very specific reason. It's not meant to be a lifestyle. It's not good for you. And then cholesterol. We know that carbohydrates, because of the fiber, can actually help bring your cholesterol levels down, which is awesome because we see that starts to increase when our estrogen starts to go down. And so carbohydrates are like a little bit like a thermostat here. Like if it's too low, your house is going to freeze. Your cortisol is going to spike up into like an emergent state, right? If we set it correctly, then our whole system regulates itself and we're good. And so when we're looking at carbs and our fat burning pathways, I've said this a few times and I say it in pretty much every podcast because it matters. Because you can do everything right. But if you're like everything right, whatever your protocol is supposed to be doing, but if your fat burning pathway is blocked and you're overstimulated in that storage pathway, your body is constantly told we have enough, let's store it, even if you're eating low calorie. Even if you're fasting and cutting carbs and doing all the exercise, and it drives you crazy. It's a very frustrating place to be. We've all been there, myself included, multiple times, because you always think you're the exception to the rule, right? And so carbs, when eaten correctly, actually help open that fat burning pathway by reducing cortisol, because if cortisol's high, blocks fat burning. It helps fuel muscles to stay active and prevents that high stress, we must conserve messaging, and supporting your thyroid, which is massive. We cannot tell you how many women come in and they're like subclinical hypothyroid. It's brutal. And so then going low carb makes it worse. And we've seen women give themselves hypothyroidism because of it. It sucks. It sucks. And so when we're looking at carbohydrates, you're like, okay, how much should I be eating then? How do I add them in? Because that's scary. We've all been very, very afraid of the potato and rice, right? We're very, very terrified. So how many carbs should you have? One, we have to figure out where you are first. Because if you go from 100 grams of carbs to 200 grams of carbs, that's an extra 100 grams of carbs. That's going to come with 4 grams of water per gram to, help you digest that, which is not bad, but the scale will spike because of that water retention, right? And you will freak out. Everybody does, right? And so we need to see where you are and increase them slowly. Most people are sitting around 180 grams of carbs. The more that you work out, the more that you struggle with sleep, the more stress that you have, the higher your carbohydrates need to be. So for myself, when I'm in maintenance, I'm usually around 200, a little bit more. And if I'm really pushing to like build muscle, or I really want to get stronger in the gym and like, put on some muscle mass, I'm increasing carbs to like 250, right? So it really depends on the person, but on average, a lot of women are sitting around 180, which is awesome. When should you have your carbohydrates? Every single meal, which people are like, what? Yes, have a carbohydrate at every meal. Just make sure that you are eating most of your protein and veggies first before dipping into your carbs. Super simple. The carbohydrates are going to provide you with energy so that you're not having these energy crashes throughout the day, and so that your blood sugar is more stable. We're not having cravings, because combating cravings can be really tough. We're going to talk about that on the next episode. And so understanding that having carbs at every meal, really, really great for you. And they should be there. And then pre and post workout. Pre-workout, have a nice quick hit of carbs, something that's going to digest quickly. I have friends that eat a Rice Krispie square before their workouts. That's their treat 3 days a week, and it digests quickly, and that's how they're getting their fuel for their workout, and it works out great. Which people might be like, what? That's crazy. You could have some fruit like watermelon, digest super quickly, right? You could have a rice cake with a little bit of peanut butter. That works too. You don't want anything with too much fiber, because you want it to get into your digestive system quickly, so you have that quick energy that you can access, right? And then post-workout as well. Post-workout, we have something called GLUT4 doors that open up in the cell that allow carbohydrates to enter muscle cells without needing to use insulin, which is awesome. So you can restore all that energy in your muscle mass and help it recover without having to use insulin, which is awesome if you're someone who struggles with insulin resistance. And then what kind of carbs should you have? Potatoes, rice, oats, quinoa, whole grains, beans, lentils, fruit. Like, you have so many options, and they're all packed with anti-inflammatories and fiber and so many vitamins and minerals and things that are going to support your body and your hormones and your metabolism, keeping those fat burning pathways open, bringing inflammation down. It's massive. And so having carbohydrates will really help with that. And then how do we eat carbs? We want to eat protein and veggies first before dipping into carbs. The order is going to be key. You don't even have to change what you're eating that much. Change the order. So if I'm wanting to have pasta, I'm going to have a salad first, or part of a salad first, and then eat some pieces of chicken first before dipping into my fettuccine Alfredo, my favorite. If I'm having a sandwich, you're like, well, I'm not going to deconstruct the sandwich. No, you're not. Have some veggies and dip first. Have some jerky first. Just when you're about to eat your meal, ask, how can I get some protein or veggies in first? That's all you're asking. Super simple. Don't overcomplicate it. If you want to have an Oreo, ask yourself, how can I get some protein first? Have a little bit of yogurt first and then have your Oreo. Like, it doesn't have to be super complicated, but we tend to overcomplicate nutrition all the time. So, carbs alone, I love this analogy. Carbs alone are like kids on a sugar high. Wild, uncontrollable, unpredictable, exhausting, right? Carbs, when you pair them with like protein, fiber, veggies, are like kids with a teacher in the room. There's more calmness, there's more structure, there's more predictability, things are more under control. I don't know what schools are like nowadays. Maybe that's not the case, right? But I like to think that's what it's like, right? So some common mistakes women make when we're, doing this whole carb journey is cutting carbs to nothing, saving carbs for late night binges, believing that fruit is bad, which is wild to me, or relying on highly processed low carb products, which, actually can increase inflammation and cause digestive issues, which we don't want. So it's almost like you're watering plants only once a week with a fire hose, because when we have carbs, then we binge, right? Because we never have them. So we just have no control over it. The roots drown, the leaves shrivel. It's not good. We need steady watering. That's what carbohydrates are like. And so the old belief might be that carbs might make me fat, but your new belief now is the right carbs at the right time fuel fat loss, support my hormones, and help support my muscle mass. And so if you are nervous about where to start, we do have a guide for you that you can download. It's in the show notes for you. Make sure you save this with all your low carb friends. And if you don't know where to start, you can also book a consultation call. I love you so, so much, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.